Okay, so I'd like to welcome you out to this little snippet where we're going to go through and show you how to do an actual installation of SharePoint and SQL. Here I've got a server that currently has Active Directory installed on it, has DNS, as well as some AAS features already turned on. We're going to be turning on some additional ones a little bit later. I've also got .NET Framework 3.5 installed, which are some prerequisites for me. In AAS, here are the different options that I have currently, or different features that I have currently installed. Let me scroll down here so you can see that. So under the Add Role Services, I'm going to make sure that, let me do it this way here instead, hang on. So we're going to come in, here we go. So I've got, I need to install my application services so I can get TCP port sharing turned on. I'm going to hit next here. Go ahead and, oh yeah, I forgot to put in, I got AAS installed. Okay, yeah, keep going. So there's TCP port sharing turned on, .NET Framework 3.5.1 turned on as well. I also want to turn on web support. And then under the Windows processing, I need to make sure HTTP activation is turned on, as well as message queuing. And go ahead and take the prereq or the other child requirements there. Go ahead and hit next. And of course, get my summary screen. Go ahead and hit next again. And then here are the different options you want to turn on for AAS. You want to make sure that you have your ASP.NET turned on, your CGI, your server-side includes, as well as your authentication. I've got here basic authentication turned on, Windows authentication. I want to make sure that for performance I've got those turned on. And then I also want to make sure that I have AAS, under AAS management, the 6.0 management capabilities. Don't need FTP. There's your summary. Hit install. We're going to let the installation go ahead and process here. While that's going, I'm going to do this real fast. So there's some prerequisites that you may want to note. These are some knowledge, some patches that you want to install as well, either if you're installing a Windows 7 or Vista. There are the links there for you, or the downloads to look for. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit closed. After that's done installing, and now again, this is granted after you've already installed Active Directory. This is not just a bare server. This is one that has a full domain implemented on it. Under features, I'm going to come in here and just real quick again, show you real fast. I'm going to make sure that I've added in here my PowerShell integration that's actually required. The integrated scripting services and PowerShell is required for SharePoint. This is what it looks like. It's basically a part of a part of Windows 7. It gives me a nice interface for using PowerShell. So in this section up here is where I can write my PowerShell script. This would be my result, and this is where I have a PowerShell command. So I can do something like a get help. I can see the results here, and if that's what I wanted to happen, I can actually go through and just start building my PowerShell script by copying and pasting, and I'm good to go. Well, I can start building those scripts. So we'll talk about PowerShell scripts maybe a little bit later on, but the ISE will definitely help you out. Okay, now I'm going to go into our admin tools, Active Directory for users and computers. And the reason why I need to come in here is I need to create some accounts that we need for installing SharePoint, both for SQL and SharePoint itself. So I'm going to come in here under my users. You can see here I've got Acme Corp. I'm going to come in here and create a new user account. Now, let's put this in an OU. I should actually put this in an OU first. I'm going to create an OU called SP 2010 accounts. And then I'm going to go through and create a couple of different accounts that we're going to use. First account that I'm going to create is simply an SQL service account that we're going to be using. And we'll just give it a login name here. Give it a password. Now the service accounts in SharePoint 07 only needed 2 properties when you actually installed. That you need to make sure that you could not change the password and that it never expires. But it's not necessary anymore with 2010, just because of the aspect that we have managed accounts that we actually rotate. So I'm going to now go through and create another one. This is going to be just my setup administrator. Again, give it a password. Make sure I disable that. Enable those 2. And I'm going to make one more account. This one's going to be for a farm account. So we'll just call this one SP Farm Account. Give it a password as well. Okay, now I need to go into assign the permissions to the setup admin account. So I'm going to come in here. Okay, so you need to make sure that you understand that the setup administrator has to be a member of the administrators group on every single server in the every SharePoint server that's actually installed. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to add them to the group, my admins group. The SQL service account, you actually don't need to assign any permissions to it, since they actually will get assigned during the installation of SQL. Okay, then what I'm going to do is go ahead and mount up my SQL CD. This happens to be in an execute or an ISO, so I mount it as a virtual drive. Do my setup. I'm going to run this as an administrator. Now you do need to make sure that you're running at least SQL 05, 64-bit. Everything has to be 64-bit now with SharePoint. So I'm going to come in here, make sure that obviously all my prerequisites have been maintained or installed. Okay, so let's check the prerequisites. Looking for any updates. Okay, so here comes where it's going to ask me for my product key. I have to accept my EULA. Go ahead and hit install. Let the hamsters run around the wheel for a second. Now, if by chance you get a compatibility warning while trying to install SQL 08 on an R2 server box, you can go ahead and continue with the install. Before running SQL Server, you'll need to at least apply Service Pack 1. That's the warning that you're going to get. I'm actually doing SQL 2008 R2 here, so I'm not going to see that. So here we go. So here it's going to show me the things I need to make sure that I have installed. It does give me a warning that I'm running this on a domain controller, and that's okay. It also gives me a warning about the firewall. I'm not that concerned about it. At this point, I'm just showing you an installation. You would want to make sure that you open up the appropriate ports if this was on a secondary machine. So in this case here, you can see I've got my firewall settings turned off, except for at the domain level. I'll go ahead and turn it off though. And if I go back and recheck, hit my rerun button, you'll notice that it's gone away. So it checks that quickly. Here you can see as far as the .NET, it's giving me a warning here, but I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to select, I'm going to do a new feature installation. Now I'm going to go through and select the directory path, as well as the features I want to install, which are going to include the SQL database engine service, as well as my management tools. Going to go ahead and hit next. Let the hamsters whirl for a second here again. Now I'm going to have my, and it shows me here that it completed or passed those tests. Now I'm going to go through and create an instance. You need to have at least one instance. I'll go ahead and select the defaults. And now I'm going to go through and adding that new SQL service account as a service account for SQL. So I'm going to hit next here. Here's where I'm going to put in that service account that I created earlier, which is going to be my domain, WAC, SQL service account. Put in the password. Ooh, excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and put in the mention here to use the same account for all SQL services. Put in the password. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Okay, so there's my Surface accounts. Go ahead and hit next. Down here, I'm going to put in the account provisioning. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in Windows Authentication. Go ahead and use the existing or the current user account. I can go through and add a different one if I want. In this case here, again, I'm going to go through and use that SQL account that I created, the SP admin, or excuse me, SQL admin. I'm going to click Next and finish the installation. Oh, we can't find it. Hang on a second here. There we go. So now that I resolved it, we'll go ahead and I'm going to be a glutton for punishment here. I just want to make sure it's working. I'm going to type in SP. Oh, got the farm account. That's SQ. There we go. So I just typed in the wrong. Okay, go ahead and hit install all. It's going to go through and do some checking. Here's my summary screen ready to install. And now again, we're going to go ahead and let the installation take place. Okay, so as the SQL installation comes to an end, there are two configuration steps that you need to do in order to make sure that SharePoint works correctly. We'll go ahead and finish this out. One of them is to assign permissions, and also for the SharePoint setup administrator, and to configure networking. So after it's done installing, we're going to go through here. I'm going to open up the SQL Server Management Studio here as soon as I'm done installing. Come down to SQL Management Studio. I'm going to then go into the security node. Oh, first I got to log in here. I'm just going to use localhost. I'm on the local machine. If you're doing this remotely, you'd type in the host name from there. So I'm going to expand out the security folder, and under the security folder, I'm going to go into logins, and under logins, under my SQL, or excuse me, I'm going to actually add a new user in here by doing a new login. The login name itself, I'm going to put in here as setup admin. Find that account. There we go. I'm going to use, go ahead and leave it as Windows Authentication. Now I need to go through and you need to make sure, first of all, it's important if you do not log on with the setup administrator, you need to make sure that you do so. So you'd want to actually start this up as a setup administrator after you set the permissions. But I'm going to come in now, come into my setup admin. I'm going to open that up, and here are the permissions I need to assign under the server roles. It needs to include DB creator, public, security admin, and sysadmin. I'm going to log out here though real fast and log back in now as the setup admin. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure you do the installation using this account. Okay, so I want to make sure I log in with the setup admin account. So let me make sure I'm logged in there. There we go. I'm going to come into my setup, my management studio, make sure I have access just for giggles. Again, type in localhost. And come into my logins. Obviously, if I'm able to get in here, I'm doing pretty good. Again, check to make sure my server roles took. They did. Go ahead and close this down. And now I'm ready to install SharePoint 2010. So in order to do that, I'm going to come in here and mount my ISO for SharePoint 2010. And that's where we're going to end. The next presentation we'll go through is actually showing you how to go through and set up SharePoint now that we've done the prerequisites with SQL.